670 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Tuesday morning. You know, gosh, I have so many thoughts that are coming to my mind because of our next conversation that we're going to have about a publication called The Conversation, actually. A book, I think, is what it is. And, you know, how I want to start this, I'm scatterbrained right now because I have a few things I want to say. When the year my dad died, which was a while now ago, 2008, right? Was it 2008?
Yes.
I remember he had been sick since like Father's Day, and at this point it was more like maybe October. It probably was October or so. And he had been sick the whole time. He had gone through some major surgeries, and he no longer could speak. He had a trach. He had this little device he had to put on his neck to speak. When he did, he hardly did. And the vibrant guy that I knew all of my life was fading fast, and yet we were all in denial that he was dying, absolutely in denial. And I don't think he was in denial. I think he knew. So I was driving away from his home after visiting, and I got a call. I don't know if it was from you, Robin, or from my mom, but somebody called and said, "Dad wants you to come back. He wants to say goodbye." Oh my God! I never cried so much in my life, I don't think. And there he was saying goodbye to me and to everybody else who came over so he could say goodbye. He lived maybe another month after that, but he knew he was going. Mm-hmm. And the folks at hospice were the sweetest people ever. I can't compliment the hospice folks enough. They were really superb, whatever adjective would work there. And, you know, and having lived through that, I've often thought, well, I should make some plans and tell people what I want, you know. We had this conversation, kind of a silly reference, I guess. We were talking about when a dog is close to dying. Mm-hmm. And one of our listeners said 5 days early is better than 5 days late. Yeah. You know, and I thought, that's how I want to go. Of course, we don't have that. That's not legal in this. Well, I think it is in Oregon, right? In one of those states out there. Okay.
I guess you're planning Are you planning a trip?
Doctor. No.
Okay.
But I mean, if you're at that point, my father was in such terrible. It was so bad for him. Anyway, Dr. Angelo E. Volandes is on the phone. I hope I said his last name correctly. He is a physician and a researcher at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. He's the founder of Advanced Care Planning Decisions, which is a nonprofit organization devoted to encouraging conversation between patients and their physicians about end-of-life care. And the book is called The Conversation, a revolutionary plan for end-of-life care. Dr. Angelo Volandes told me I could just refer to him as Angelo, so from this point on I won't be so formal. Good morning. I will for this one more time. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Good morning, Larry and Robin, and it's great to be here.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Boston, where we are under 7 feet of snow.
That's how I want to die. I want to die looking out the window at snow. I don't know what that means. Sorry, I didn't get a laugh at all. I was struggling for a laugh on that. Well, thank you for being on the air with us. Yeah, this is, you know, the folks at hospice, both when my dad was dying and then later on when my mom died, they gave me actually a form in my mom's case for her to fill out for her last, you know, the things she wanted us to do, and part of it was something separate from the will.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's really special to be speaking with you because Ocala is very near and dear to my heart. My mother-in-law lives in Ocala, and in fact, my late father-in-law received excellent hospice care right there on Ocala. His daughter, who is my wife, is from Ocala, and when they had the conversation with him, he wanted to focus on high-quality care at the end of his life, focused on making sure that the quality of his life was excellent and that he was comfortable. And so the hospice there in Ocala provided really outstanding care world-class care. So it's a real pleasure to speak with you this morning
Oh,
from Ocala.
what a sweet thing to say. And those are the same folks, I'm sure, that I'm referring to. It's the same hospice group anyway. So the book, did the book come out of that experience?
It absolutely did. In fact, my mother-in-law's discussion with herself, with her husband, and with her family about what was best at the end of life really influenced the way I understand how to talk to patients and what's important to them. You know, so often in this country, we fail as a healthcare system and as doctors to start this process with patients years before they become sick, years before they end up in our hospitals. And so the book is really a call to action for people to start this process early, when they're feeling well, when they are enjoying every day of their lives. Because look, the fact is, one day we're all going to die. And so every good life deserves a good ending. And we're not talking about a good death. We're talking about living as long as you can for as well as you can.
Yeah, I guess so. I worked for a while at an assisted living facility, and some of the residents there had a flyer, for lack of a better way to say this, that was a do not resuscitate order. And I thank goodness, never had to be in the room when I had to worry about that. But is that separate from what we're talking about? And is a living will separate from what we're talking about?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Look, once you have a conversation with your provider, and the questions are relatively simple, it's what's a good day for you? What are the things that give you happiness and meaning in your life? And what sort of medical care would you want if you weren't able to do those things? Once you have that conversation, then you need to put that in writing so that the healthcare system protects and honors your wishes. So one way to do that is to complete a living will. And a living will is a form that says the sort of things you do or do not want if you become seriously ill. And one of those things, which I talk a lot about in the book, is about a procedure called CPR. You know, CPR is a procedure that attempts to restart your heart. And for people who are healthy, it works great. But for people who have a serious illness, who are frail or elderly, or who have a terminal condition, the chances of surviving CPR aren't good by any means. And so many people prefer not to have these procedures done at the end of life, especially if they lead to complications and don't turn out to be helpful at the end of life.
Are these decisions better to be made between yourself and your physicians and your attorney, or should the family be involved and go with you when you're drawing up the papers and making those decisions?
Thanks, Robin. I think that's an excellent point. I think you should start this process first at home. You know, have a conversation with your loved one, with your spouse, with your kids. I think it's important to also involve your pastor. You know, these conversations shouldn't just be thought of as in the healthcare system. I think if you're talking about these things, why not bring it up at church? You know, what could be more important than talking with your pastor and your family about what's important to you, especially as the end of life approaches? And then when you've had an opportunity to talk about these things, go ahead and start the discussion with your doctor. You know, one thing I advise patients' families to do is when you start this process, go ahead and use your iPhone or your tablet or your iPad and record yourself having this discussion with your family and email it to everyone. Email that short video. This way they can refer back to it should the need arise, when you're critically ill and perhaps in the ED and ER and not able to speak for yourself.
So the medical things seem like a no-brainer. Like, you obviously, if you don't want tubes in you, you don't want to be artificially kept alive, that kind of thing. But what about other non-essential things? Like, I mean, do you have that conversation? Like, hey, when I'm getting ready to die, make sure you put Mozart on, or
yeah.
I mean, do you have that kind of stuff coming up in these conversations?
Absolutely. And why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you have Mozart playing? Or, I know my mother-in-law would love to have Amazing Grace in the background because she loves gospel music. So why not talk about what's important to you? What are your rituals and beliefs that you would want, especially when it comes to cultural and religious things? Why not talk about that?
I want the Hooters girls to come in. I think maybe I'll snap back out of it.
Yeah.
Talking about these things doesn't have to be a sad conversation. It could be joyful. Look, it could be a celebration of your life. And I think that's really important for all of us to recognize.
I think it would be creepy for the Hooters girls. Who's that old guy dying over there?
Yeah, exactly.
He's the guy who hired you. All right.
Yeah.
We need to take a little break, and this is an important conversation, and forgive my silliness. It's part of my contract. I have to be silly. Dr. Angelo Volandes. Am I saying your last name correctly, Doctor?
Everybody calls me Dr. Angelo, but you're saying my last name correct.
Oh, I am? Okay. Well, Dr. Angelo will be back. And if you have a question, by the way, please feel free to call. The number is 622-9622, and we'll tell you how to get the book in just a bit. This is The Source, and we'll be right back after this.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. A few fog patches this morning. Otherwise, it'll be a partly sunny day with a high of 76 to 83. And partly cloudy tonight and mild, though 61 to 65. Tomorrow, mostly sunny and warm, high 81 to 85. For Thursday, periods of clouds and sunshine, the high 82 to 86. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Ooh, a xylophone. Sounds dreamy.
Yeah, they don't make them like this anymore, Robin. I'm shipping it to the Musical Historical Society.
And you're packing it like that?
What, this won't work?
Why don't you take it to the Personal Service Center at the corner of Northeast 25th Avenue and 24th Street in Ocala? Just look for the yellow signs.
Great idea. That'll save me a lot of time.
The passing of time.
Personal Service Center makes sending packages easy.
And quick, call 789-6683.
For the Personal Service Center.
Hi, I'm Seth with AA Lock, Dock, and Security. Have you ever thought about the locks or security on your house or business? Have you ever wondered why the keys to your new car cost so much? Well, at AA Lock, Dock, and Security, we can help with securing your valuables. We can even replace those expensive transponder keys. We can give you the knowledge that no one else will. Call AA Lock, Dock, and Security at 867-1965. That's 867-1965.
Hi, Matt Wilkerson here, your mobile Verizon rep. But not just here, I'll deliver the phone to you in your home. While I'm there, I'll only sell you what you need and I'll personalize it to you. Want to have me get you connected? Then call me at 352-528-0020. I even offer unlimited home phone service for just $20 per month. Just call me, your mobile Verizon rep, at 352-528-0020.
Join us on Saturday, March 7, 2015 for the second annual Habitat Strawberries Festival at the McPherson Government Complex. The goal of this festival is not only to provide a great time for families in Ocala, but to also raise funds to build a home for our family and our community and support Habitat for Humanity's mission to strengthen communities, build hope, and provide dignified housing solutions. Remember, Saturday, March 7, 2015 for the second annual Habitat Strawberries Festival at the McPherson Government Complex, which starts at 7 a.m. with breakfast.
All right, 18 minutes after 11 o'clock. Dr. Angelo Volandes is on the phone up in Boston, where I think it's freezing cold and snowing.
Yeah.
I think. Even though it is March 3rd. We're already into spring mode over here, right?
Right, for a little bit.
For a little bit. Who knows? It might be done with winter. The book we're talking about is called The Conversation, A Revolutionary Plan for End-of-Life Care, and really good advice. And we've probably all experienced somebody who has died and gave us an idea for, well, when it's our time, this is what I want. So that's why I think everybody can relate to this. How could you not relate to this? Mm-hmm. Dr. Angelo said we can just refer to him as Angelo or Dr. Angelo.
Yes.
I prefer the doctor. I have a hard time stepping back from a formality unless I really know you. So
yeah.
It's kind of like using usted in Spanish.
Yes.
Like I have to always say usted.
Yes.
So doctor, I was thinking, I made a silly comment about the Hooters girls when I die, but you know what? I know something, and this is kind of just a little side thing. When my uncle was dying, he looked like he was dead already. And the TV came. The TV was on in this room, mm-hmm. and there was a bikini girl. I am not making this up on the screen, and his eyes got bright, and he had a smile. And I said, "That never goes away, does it?" I mean, on your deathbed, you're still a man, aren't you?
Your book is filled with stories from patients that have had to deal with different end-of-life experiences. They're pretty moving.
Thank you so much. And, I try to recount 7 patients' stories who really affected me as a physician. And what I try to explain to people is that I understand it's difficult to have this conversation, but let me tell you what's going to happen to you in our healthcare system if you don't start this process with your doctor and let people know what you want. Because today we've designed a healthcare system where the default is do everything. So unless you tell your doctor to stop, or if you tell the healthcare system, this is what I want to focus on quality of life, not quantity of life, the healthcare system is going to throw everything at you, and it might not be the things that you want when the risks are so high and the benefits are so low. And so I hope the story moves people to actually do something about it, because although we talk about patient-centered care, today patients are not at the center of our healthcare system.
So how do we know? I mean, how does anybody know? Like, let's say you come up with an end-of-life plan when you're 60, and then suddenly something happens when you're 65. That's not that old. At least it isn't to me. But you know what I mean? How do you know that that's the end of life? How do you know?
You're absolutely right, and that's why this isn't a one-time conversation, but a conversation over time. And I tell people this, look, if you're healthy today and you're doing great and you have great meaning in your life, then you would definitely want everything possibly done. But what we want people to think about is what happens when you're not able to do the things that you enjoy yourself. And when we have these things in medicine that aren't always successful, what about things that interventions like CPR, where if you do have a serious illness, they actually don't help you? You know, these are the sort of questions. And you know, people are going to change their mind over time, and you're supposed to. You know, I just had an 85-year-old gentleman who ran the Honolulu Marathon.
Wow.
You know, good for him. But, you know, he told me, if there's a day where I can't do the things that I enjoy, please don't do these aggressive interventions on my body. I want you to focus aggressively on making sure the quality of my life is just as good each day, but don't prolong the suffering, don't prolong the dying process. That's what's happening across our country, unfortunately, all too often.
Is it the state of Washington or Oregon? One of them has a euthanasia is permissible in one of those states, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are actually a few states in our country which allow this, but I want to be clear. The book doesn't talk about that issue. It really talks about making sure people's wishes are honored and making sure people aren't suffering, and that the healthcare system doesn't prolong the dying process. So I just want to be clear that, you know, what I'm talking about is something called advanced care planning, which is very different from what's going on in Oregon, and Vermont is the other state, among others.
Is the book set up like a workbook in a way where you can, I mean, obviously you've got some stories in it as well, but I mean, does it kind of take us by the hand and maybe give us ideas on what to talk about, even if maybe things we wouldn't think of? Yeah.
So this is a book that not only tells you the problem, it tells you how you can empower yourself. So there's a how-to guide to make sure that you get the right care at the right time, but on your terms. And so I think for the state of Florida in particular, where a lot of people over the age of 65 deal with this daily, this is the perfect book for you, because it tells you how to protect yourself.
And how does that work when you're moving from a state to state? If you live in one state and then you come down to Florida, for example, and you might be a snowbird, or maybe you're just here on vacation, and something happens, do the attending physicians have access to all of your medical records via computer, or do you have a certain place to put the paperwork and take with you all the time? How does that play out?
Absolutely. So for the millions of snowbirds from the Northeast that come down to Florida, they have to make sure that the local hospitals have copies of their advanced directives, so copies of their living wills, but also copies of their healthcare proxies or surrogates, their sons and daughters who would speak on their behalf. So it's critically important for those snowbirds and for the people who live in Florida that they have these filed at the local hospital, or to have their local physicians know about them. Really, really important.
And designating, you said the health surrogate, that's an important thing to designate, right? The one person who's going to do that.
Absolutely. That might be the most important thing for each of us to do. But you can't just designate someone. You actually have to explain to them, what are your wishes? So what's important to you? What are the things you would or would not want? And where would you want to spend the remainder of your life? For instance, my mother-in-law, who lives right there in Ocala, has designated her daughter, my wife, as her healthcare surrogate. And so they have had a conversation about what's important to her and what sort of things she would and would not want. And, you know, I tell this to my mother-in-law all the time. It's a gift that she has given to both of us, both my wife and me, because, you know, it's really hard to make these decisions when you don't have your parent there to help you and when it's 3 a.m. And so having this conversation is a gift you're giving to your kids so that you're not burdening them to make these decisions on their own.
Wow. That sounds like a really difficult discussion, a really difficult conversation. I'm putting myself now in the dying person's, instead of in the son's position, I'm putting myself in the father's position because I have a son. And I'm just having a hard time imagining this conversation, you know? But you're making a lot of sense. It has to happen. And it's like I can wait, but no, how do you know? I mean, you could, something could be necessary tomorrow.
Right.
Absolutely. And Larry, just with the story that you opened up with about your dad, I mean, I think his being able to say goodbye to you is such a rarity in our healthcare system today. You know, so often parents aren't able to say their last goodbyes. So the fact that you were able to is really just a wonderful, wonderful story of what's possible when we're open and frank about this discussion. And the truth is, I think a lot of parents do want to say their final goodbyes and have the opportunity to actually talk about this exact issue.
Is there more paperwork involved when the children are minors because you have to provide for them also?
That's correct. So generally, the person who you designate as a surrogate has to be a legal adult. This varies from state to state. But then there's the other issue is if you do have a young child at home, who takes care of that? And that's why these conversations often involve not just what's going to happen to you, but what happens to your loved ones. And, you know, the best we can do is to prepare for it and make sure that we cover all the issues that will arise with our passing.
Also, let them know what you want done with your parrot, because your parrot is going to outlive you and your children and your children's children.
That's right.
Absolutely. And, you know, the funny thing is I tell my mother-in-law this all the time. She has a wonderful selection and collection of really wonderful Christmas items in her house. It's Christmas year-round in Ocala, Florida, in her home. I asked her, I want those things to remind me of her. So not just Christmas, but every day.
Yeah, well, good information. Yeah, it's a really good topic, and it's gosh, when you think about it like intellectually, you know, you say, gosh, well that makes sense. But when you think about it personally and emotionally, all of a sudden you realize this is not an easy conversation to have.
Absolutely, it isn't. But you know, I hope my book helps people have the conversation and to protect themselves from a healthcare system that often forgets who should be in the driver's seat, patients, not the healthcare system.
Does the health, what is it called again, surrogate, does that person have more leverage in answering the doctor's questions about wishes with a written wish list from the patient, as opposed to just like, let's say I say to my son, look, this is what I don't want, but I don't put anything in writing. Is it easier for, okay? Yeah,
so this varies from state to state. But having something in writing is always helpful evidence, in addition to you stating, you know, I've actually had this conversation with my parent. This is what they explicitly told me.
I like the line in the press material, a life well lived deserves a good ending.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I say every day. I go to bed. This, you know, I gotta have a good ending. Let me do something good. I'll get some chocolate or something. And you thought I was going to go sexual on you, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, all right. The book is called The Conversation. How do we get the book, Doctor?
It's available everywhere. All bookstores, Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon and BarnesandNobles.com. It's in the bookstore right now.
All right. Well, good luck with that, and thank you for being on the air with us. And what a cool coincidence that you happen to have family right here in Ocala.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure being here, and again, a shout out to my mother-in-law, who's a wonderful person, and the wonderful people of Ocala. I really appreciate it.
All right, and I'm so happy to hear that you share the same experience with our local hospice folks. So, the book again, The Conversation. Do you have a website for the book?
Yes, it's theconversationbook.org.
Okay, excellent. And Robin actually has that already on our guest list. So if you're driving and can't write it down, that's where you'll find it, or just call us. We'll be glad to repeat it. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. Take care.
We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The Israeli Prime Minister addresses a joint meeting of Congress at the invitation of Republican lawmakers.
Administration officials are essentially boycotting the speech, and at least 40 congressional Democrats also plan to skip it, a move that Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert says sends the wrong message.